Jason.
Hi, Alexandra.
I'm so happy to see you. I missed you.
I missed you too.
Thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So in addition to being a friend of mine, you are also a very, very accomplished New York City actor. You have been in The Lion King, you've made TV appearances and shows like Chicago Fire, and most recently, you were in the Pulitzer Prize winning musical, A Strange Loop.
Yay!
So I'd love to hear where you grew up and then how, why, and when you moved to New York in the first place.
I grew up everywhere. Both my mom and my dad were in the Air Force. I'm an Air Force brat. Mother's Jamaican. Father is also an Air Force brat, so I'm second generation. So we moved everywhere. California, Texas, Germany, Alabama, and then we landed in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And that's where I'm currently at and have been since coming here from St. Louis when I was ready to start taking a show at the St. Louis Rep. I graduated college in 2002. Never mind dating myself. And then moved to Denver for a year. And then from Denver, moved to New York in 2003 to pursue being an actor and, Broadway and all that stuff. So in October, it will be 17 years that I've lived in New York.
Wow. So you're really, really a New Yorker. What was your first, I need to pay the bills job? And then what was your first professional job as an actor?
In New York City, first, I need to pay the bills job. I got a job within a week and a half of being in New York. It was at B. Smith's restaurant, formerly B. Smith's restaurant, 46th between 8th and 9th on Restaurant Row, right next to Joe Allen's.
Yeah, I know that area changes so much. I worked at the Film Center Cafe on...
I was just talking about that.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Yeah, no longer there.
44th and 9th. It was on 9th Avenue.
Yeah, by Rudy's.
Yes.
Yeah, the Film Center Cafe. It's now something else, but that was my first ever waitressing job, my first job in New York. So.
And then my first gig that I got when I was in New York was a production of Miss Saigon at the Carousel Dinner Theater in Akron, Ohio.
The business has changed so much in the past few years. I'd love to hear a little bit about your early auditioning experience and how you felt moving through the audition processes for some of these bigger shows.
I think the main difference for me was a couple of things. A, the school that I went to, that I graduated from, University of Northern Colorado at the time, was a great school in terms of craft and becoming the best artist you can be, but they weren't, the business education was null and void. So honestly, when I moved here, there was a little bit of naivete in terms of me maneuvering through the business.
Which I think anyone that went to school for anything creative will say that.
I definitely had the I'm gonna just go to every and anything. Before smartphones and apps and technology, it was a great shuffle of community where it's kind of just hey, when you get to Chelsea, let me know, text me, let me know what's going on if they're singing on Equity. It was a big network of communication of people sending out flares in the sky. The old Equity Audition Center, when if you were non-Equity, you had to use the McDonald's bathroom to change and do all those things. So it was definitely hustle, vibe, and energy. And as far as a person of color, it's a different mindset now. We have more words and knowledge of vocabulary and wokeness, if you will. I think I was less discerning about what I was going in for and who I was working with. It was more just about becoming booked, and you don't think about your boundaries or the level of integrity you have. Not that I didn't have integrity, but you don't think about what situations you do or don't want to be in.
That also, I feel comes with age. You learn.
Yes. It does. It does. So right when I got there, I started a couple of arcs of auditioning for shows a number of times. The Lion King was also the main one, where from the time I got to New York up until the time I booked it when I was 29, I was going in at least 2 or 3 times a year.
Really? I didn't realize that. So you had been going in for The Lion King for years.
For years. I would say, including callbacks or work sessions, it was a good 34 sessions before I booked.
Wow. And then tell everyone, what part did you play?
I was in the ensemble. On the tour, understudy Bonsai, and in the ensemble, one of the hyenas. And then when I got to Broadway, understudy Bonsai and Mufasa. But before that, I had literally been in for any part that could be played by a Black man in the show. I started out going in for Simba. That ended real quick. Then Mufasa's for a very long time, but I was too young and too skinny, I was told. And then they started swimming for the hyena. And then, lo and behold, someone with the right measurements and costumes left the show. And I got a spot.
There you were.
Yeah. When I think about the audition process for Lion King, I think long, I think frustrating. Looking back, it's one of those situations where it's a perfect example of being in the room multiple times and experiencing microaggressions, I'm going to call them extreme microaggressions, via Mark Brandon, the casting director, via Binder Casting, who that is one of his main accounts, in terms of the way that they express what they need from you in the room, particularly with auditioning for the Hyenas. Literally, it's almost like a script that I've heard so many times over and over again. But it's an example of being faced with something and in that split second, having to choose how to deal with it, whether because you're scared or because you're concerned about your career. So the Hyenas in the show, someone described them as, urban. They're hood. They're hood. They're hood. That's the interpretation that they prefer. 3 hood people and Hyenas. Fine, whatever. So going into auditions, things like there would be the impressions that Mark would do that were just kind of like, he might as well put on blackface, using words like jive, hood, thugs. And that would happen pretty much every time that I would go in. And then the last time I went in before I got it, which was for the Vegas company, at this point in time, I was already off book. Right. And he was just like, it's not, when I would go there, they would tell me to pull back because it was too hood. So I had a problem of, I didn't know how to be Disney hood. That makes sense, right? If you want me to play the character as someone who's from the hood, I got you. But I didn't know what they were looking for. And in my last audition, he just said, just play it like if he was your father. I said, what? He said, just do it like if it was your father, And I said, okay. So the next round, I did Bonsai as if I was my father. And he goes, what was that? I was just like, you told me to do Bonsai as my father. He goes, that was more like Mufasa. And I said, well, you told me to be like my father. My father's not from the hood. You told me to be like my father.
I can't imagine having to internalize those comments, just pretend like they aren't happening so that you can do your job, so that you can hopefully get a huge Broadway contract, which will pay your bills and elevate your career.
I'm open about talking about this, not to have anyone canceled or their job taken away, because it probably wouldn't happen anyway, even if that was my objective. My first objective is to outwardly acknowledge the universal experience of complacency for survival, right?
Yeah.
As people of color, and to be honest with you, women too, making split decisions that can be sometimes even traumatic. It doesn't feel like it's a decision, it's just instinctual. It's just like let it roll off your shoulders, and then you realize afterwards, what the hell was just said to me? I talk about this a lot to bring out the common experience, but it still aids in it continuing to happen. And the second reason why I talk about it and why I do use names is for people who have yet to have gotten on the show or have yet to go in for the show. I'm concerned with the Black folks and Black kids who are waiting outside the door. So when they hear about this and that it's consistent and that they know who his name is, when they find out they have an appointment, they can either say, hey, I can't put up with that, I'm not interested. Or they can say, you know what, I don't care, I want the job. Or a medium of both, where when they walk in, they now know, and he will know that we know. So when he pulls that stuff again, with confidence, someone can be like, could you rephrase that or figure out a better way to give me that no?
Exactly.
Without the fear, because now that we know that he knows, there's no more fear that it might affect me moving forward in the audition process.
Right. And that younger actor will know that they're not the only one who has maybe experienced something like that.
I think about that all the time, and I think about how I knew that was off and unnecessary. That's the thing. There's just so many other words you could use to get me to where you need to be. And now it's different. Now I think with maturity and age, I know how to do that in a firm and assertive way.
I mean, the term microaggression wasn't even being thrown around until
never.
There was words to name these feelings that felt off. We didn't have language. I'm wondering, have you noticed a change in the language being used and in the culture as an actor in New York City?
I do believe there is positive change. I think there are people who are actually trying to restructure the way that they think about things, from casting, language in terms of breakdowns. I think breakdowns are getting more specific in terms of what they're looking for. But what happens with language specifically, that then what I see is a lot of buzzwords being used in an effort to show us that there's a change. And a lot of times I don't see really a change actually happening. I think breakdowns and audition notices in reference to our business are easier to decode So I do think that like the positive is that people are, whether it's genuine or not, putting things down on paper and, you know, sticking to it. And I think that in an effort to showcase or prove or say, hey, look what we did, we're running into territories of like tokenism. For me, I'm not going to clap for you if you say, look, we have a bunch of people of color. I'm kind of like, yeah, but they're in the ensemble.
Right. You're
like,
saying,
where's
what, do you deserve an award for casting an ensemble that looks like the world? That's the minimum.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think the most positive things that I'm seeing feel like the most negative and uncomfortable things. I think it's positive for certain writers or groups or establishments who are now being challenged to truly be challenged. I think having the language like microaggressions or any of that stuff, the most positive thing is that it gives people in general the language to advocate for themselves and specify, because when you can put a word to something, it can't be refuted. Beforehand, part of people's disconnect when I would try to describe what we now know as a microaggression, it was so easily just dismissed as me just having a feeling and me thinking that I was crazy.
Sure.
But then when we get the term microaggression, you say, this is a microaggression, someone's gonna be like, well, they can't refute that.
No, not at all.
You know?
And speaking of learning and language, I want to talk to you about the word colorblind. Because I remember being a little kid and a lot of really, really well-intentioned adults and educators were teaching and saying things like, you know, and I also went to Catholic school, God loves everyone. God is colorblind. We are all colorblind. We don't see color because we're all equal. But then I think we've learned that that's a little bit problematic because it doesn't then allow us to notice or learn about the great and interesting and unique way that we're different.
Yes.
And to honor and learn about our differences. So I want to ask you, what do you think is a better way to have those discussions or to educate?
So one, I'm also of the colorblind, not see color generation. I think it's a big generation. And I think it's a perfect example of something that was well-intentioned and became performative. You know, we are the children of the civil rights movement. So in an effort to equalize everyone, everyone's equal, the whole I have a dream utopia thing was there. And that is dangerous for a lot of reasons. One, you know, in terms of being a person of color, it's dangerous for people to not see color because then you don't see the differences in how we were treated unfairly on everyday life. When it comes to what we do as artists in casting, colorblind is dangerous, and the term colorblind and the philosophy of colorblind casting is dangerous because of this. As audiences in general, we are trained to only go on an unbiased journey with white actors, right? If a white actor, usually male, says, I'm a frog, we automatically go with him on that journey as a frog. If a white actor says, today I'm going to be Meryl Streep, try as he might, we're going to give him the opportunity to convince us that you're Meryl Streep. If you are a person of color or disabled or any sort of other, no matter your training, no matter your facility, no matter your process, there is no such thing as the audience is not seeing your color on the stage. Doesn't mean that they won't go on the journey, but the automatic shift to believe that you're whatever you want will not happen. As a person of color, we should be able to bring our experiences, my Blackness, whatever that means for me and for the role, to the role, because that's just going to make it more layered and special anyway.
And I do feel like there are a lot of people in our age group who are struggling to find the balance, having come from the colorblind, well-intentioned education style. How do you feel like that affects social interaction? I know as a white person, I think in my past, it has stopped me from maybe having a really amazing, wonderful, productive, educational conversation because there's this little voice from when I was little saying, you're not supposed to notice. You're not supposed to notice.
Sure. Yeah. I think the more that I think about colorblind casting or colorblind reference casting, the more I realize how it's no different than our approach in life, walking through life not seeing color. It is important to see people's color. It's important to see cultural specificity. It's important to see the different strengths and superpowers of each group. More often than not, white people in general, their fear of, and I don't even think it's a fear of being wrong. I think it's a fear of being corrected.
I agree with you.
And the assumption that if you're corrected, that equates to being racist were bad. And in reference to people of color, I think in general, I don't think people of color are not wanting to call things out. It's just that if they do, they run the risk of a number of things happening. Either dealing with someone who's defensive and doesn't really want to have the conversation, or it being turned on them and then, being told that they're angry. It can also be exhausting. I think that, in my opinion, what I challenge everyone that's white is to ask them, not, okay, when you do see color, because you do, when you see color, what is it that you're seeing? I've never encountered someone who stands by not seeing color.
Of course, it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's not realistic. But people who are adamant about saying, I don't see color, those same people always, always, always say that about me, but have a different opinion about my brother. Or have a different opinion about someone who looks like what they think is someone dangerous. So there's a separation. They're putting me over here and basically saying, oh, you're not like them. So at some point, you do see something.
Exactly.
At some point, you do see something. I'm always challenging white folks to really examine when they say they don't see color, there is something that you're seeing. So what is it?
And let's look at that.
Yeah, and let's look at it, yeah.
The next thing I want to talk with you about is the connection that has always been there, I mean, for many years, between Black voices and LGBTQIA voices. I want to connect those dots. In my mind, something that really sticks out in our history is the Stonewall riot. Summer of 1969, to kind of set the scene, we've had the civil rights movement by then. We've had the anti-Vietnam War protests. Yeah. Also, Greenwich Village was one of the few areas in the country that was accepting the LGBTQ community. And it was getting that bar, the Stonewall Inn, which I think we've both been to. Yeah. Was getting raided all the time. And this one night in 1969, people fought back. After people fought back, we have gay pride every year now. We have, gay activist groups. It's a monthly celebration. But it started with fighting back. I would love to hear your thoughts about that connection between these two groups of people, and then how over time that has led to the history of why people say there's no right way to protest. And when people say that, what are they referring to? Okay, so let's start with Stonewall. I always want to make sure that people realize too that it was Black and brown trans women that started fighting back. And which means if Stonewall is the beginning of what has become Pride, that means that the people that we have to thank are Black and brown trans women. Right. Black and brown members of the queer community. And I think that the fact that I definitely had heard of Stonewall, maybe at some point in college, didn't really go on any research, and then getting to New York and then hearing more, enough to know that just like lots of types of history, we're not taught that. Exactly. You know what? I didn't know anything about it till I walked by the bar. I saw the plaque. I looked it up. I went in. I checked it out myself. Had no clue until I moved to New York. Yeah. I even think the first few times I went to Stonewall, there was a disassociation. And even though I knew this was a Stonewall, it took me a while to be like, this is Stonewall. Right. Because over time, I think it's a natural progression of any sort of movement. Over time, you have the younger generations that have benefited from the struggles and the fights of the generations before them. So there's a lack of weight and sometimes a lack of knowledge or acknowledgement about why we're in the place that we're in now. And I think now that Stonewall is something that's more in the general consciousness of even the queer community, let alone the world, it's time for the real narrative to be told. And you're saying that bothers you because you feel like the Black and brown people who have been a part of that history, those stories have been erased. Oh, they've been completely erased. I mean, the fact that it's 2020, and even though it's been kind of been screamed for a very, very long time, that it's just now being acknowledged that we would not have pride if it were not for Black and brown people. There would all these phrases that we're using, all this culture that we're using would not be here without Black and brown people. And what's happening right now, and has been happening for the last 4 years, is that racism within the queer community has been highlighted. There are a lot of white gay men who have been so used to being the figurehead for the queer movement that they are having a hard time accepting that there might be people out there that have more to deal with than they do. It's not about the oppression Olympics, but the reality is being white and gay is rough, or can be rough. It's not the same thing as being gay and this, and this, and this.
I didn't come up with this. It's Amanda Seales, who's an amazing comedian, writer, actress. She's great. Follow her. She has this phrase that I like in reference to white folks. There are white folks, and then there are human beings that happen to be white. I prefer to surround myself with the latter and feel in general, the white people in my life are the latter. There's a lot of white folks in the gay community. And they're not helping by not acknowledging that at the end of the day, they might feel that their gayness or their queerness is the forefront of what walks when they walk in the room, but that's not the case. What happens first is this.
Right.
For me, I'm Black and I'm gay, but this for me has always and has to come first, because that's what people see when I walk in the door first.
So you're saying that comes first because that's the first thing people see before they get to know you as a person.
And I even have it easier because, you know, I have the ability, if I want to butch it up, as they say. You know, I was telling a friend of mine, a white gay, this was years ago, and I said, at the end of the day, all you have to do is utilize your acting training and butch it up, and no one will be the wiser about anything about you. I can't do that. When I think about Stonewall, I think about, you know, part of the story too is that even though those riots started and Pride happened, people have to realize too, just because that happened, it wasn't like all of a sudden it went to Kumbaya. Those Black and brown bodies still had clubs, gay clubs, that they weren't welcome in.
Comparing that time to what's going on today, we see protesters on the news, we see people holding up signs. So when you see someone holding up a sign that says it all started with a riot and there's no right way to protest, can you sort of connect the dots to what does that mean? What are those two phrases mean?
Well, it all started with a riot. I think that that's definitely just reminding folks who have a problem with the way people are advocating for themselves that most change has happened with a riot, including white folks doing it at the beginning of this country. And then that there's no right way to protest. There's no right way to protest is also an acknowledgement of people's notes or criticisms about the way people advocate for themselves. I am someone who, when it comes to situations like this, and I'm in the presence of someone who has anything to say about the way anyone should protest, I get pissed off, because there's no, what way do you want us to do it? Because no matter what we do, y'all got a problem.
Right. The most recent example of that being Colin Kaepernick kneeled.
Yes.
And people
you had a problem then. You know,
their mind.
Yes. You lose your minds if we're kneeling. You lose your minds if we're voting. You lose your minds if we're writing letters to someone. We lose your minds if we're using a platform like Instagram or social media. You're losing your minds if someone who's famous makes a speech or says something political at a damn award show. It's just like we can't do anything. I'm not having a conversation with anyone about tone in the way that anyone expresses themselves, particularly if we're not going to acknowledge why that person or those people are communicating in the way that they do. And I think it is unnecessary and telling if there is no right way for us to present our case to you, that you will swallow the pill.
People are ignoring how long this has been going on,
how
long this has been an issue, because we learn a lot of times in school that there was slavery, there was Rosa Parks, there was Martin Luther King, and then Martin Luther King saved everything. It's all been fine.
It makes the implication that once the slaves were freed, that there was a shift that happened in terms of mess cleaned up. If anything, it made things worse. Once the slaves were freed, what happened was there were laws that said if you went to jail, you could then be put back into slavery. So then Black people started getting arrested for things like loitering, selling something. This is right after slavery.
There's a really good documentary on this on Netflix right now called The 13th.
13th, yeah. It should be required to be shown in school. I think it should be shown once in junior high, and then it should be shown in high school. So slavery just changed outfits. There was an outfit change. So it was dressed like slavery, and then it became the prison pipeline. It became indentured servitude. Jim Crow laws came into effect. All those things that still kept people, Black people, at the bottom of the rung. For people who talk about in terms of numbers and statistics of Black people dying, well, it's always thrown out. And the easiest way to refute that is just based off of percentages and numbers. Given the smaller percentage of the population that is Black people compared to the rate that they're being killed in an alarming rate for their percentage, for their population. Obviously, yes, there are more white people in the country. So therefore, sure, more white people are being killed, but that doesn't change the fact that a larger portion of the African American or Black community, I should say, is getting killed because we're a smaller portion of the country. On top of that too, just, first of all, it's on video. I'm sure there are people who've been killed by the cops unnecessarily that are white. I am sure. But the videos that we're seeing right now are focused on Black people. And for the people who think that things are equal, I don't really know how to respond to that, because it's a statement that causes strong feelings of distrust in a day and age where there's so much technology, there's so much information, there's so many receipts that show us what's happening. And for that to not register to you, I don't even know what that disconnect is. I don't know.
For me, when I've been having these difficult conversations with people right now, I'm finding what's helpful is to get the statistics out. Like, we're throwing those numbers out, and let's just talk about day-to-day quality of life.
Yes.
I've gotten pulled over 3 to 4 times for speeding, totally let off with a warning. Have a good day, ma'am. That's not the reality for everyone. And I'd love to hear about maybe some of your personal experiences.
Sure.
Whatever you'd like to share.
In terms of getting pulled over for a DWB, driving while Black, it's happened to me twice, both in my hometown of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Once was on a military base, an Air Force base, which there are 5 up here. And I was lucky that my parents were pretty successful in their careers being in the military, to the point where when we were driving, what they told us to do, particularly if we were on a base, the first thing we do is we drop their name. In my experiences with being pulled over, not that I got out of a ticket, they gave me a ticket, but when I dropped my parents' names is when I had a card to pull, I should say. And I'm very blessed that I had a card to pull, because it would not have been the same situation. So I had just gotten here to Colorado March 16th. Mm-hmm. It's within my first week of being here. So I had to take a walk down my neighborhood, and upon coming back to my house, a cop car pulled up, and I was just like, okay, what's going on? To please get out. I'm 4 houses away from my parents' house. And the male cop, the white cop, was just like, how you doing today? I was like, I'm good. So you live around here? And I said, what's this about? And so the Black cop says, well, someone in the neighborhood feels concerned. And I said, and at this point in time, I'm getting a little nervous because my license doesn't say that I'm from Colorado.
Right, because you're displaced because of COVID in your hometown, much like all of us, like
yes.
right now.
Yes. And I've lived here permanently since 1998. And the neighbors that would know me, if there were any neighbors who could vouch for me, are either dead or they moved away. I could just be anyone. Now, me walking through a neighborhood on the street or in the sidewalk, I don't understand why that's a problem. So I immediately said, you either need to escort me to my house or I need to call my father.
What is going through your head in this interaction?
What is going through my head in this interaction is this weird up swirl of, Jason, you have the skills to stay calm and get home safely. Watch your tone, watch what you say, be concise, be clear. And then on this shoulder is just me checking is someone looking out the window? Who is it? Are they behind? Who did this? Who did this?
I can't imagine emotionally exhausted.
I feel like I gathered quickly what was happening. It was sadness and anger. Thank God my dad was home. If he wasn't, I don't know what would have happened. And then after that, it was quickly decided that was just like front yard, backyard, that's it. So you're not going anywhere else, which sucks, For me, what sucks I'm 40 years old. I think it's ridiculous that I can't walk anywhere. It's not that I can't walk anywhere. I'm just not going to have, I'm not going to have them scared and freak out about it.
Right.
I'm not going to have my mom and my dad worried.
Right.
Because, I'm 40 years old, but I'm their baby. Yeah. So that definitely sucks. It is things like that put up one more brick. When I do feel comfortable walking through the streets, I'm not saying hi to anybody. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not doing it. I'm not looking anyone in the eye. I'm not acknowledging when someone says hi to me because I don't trust any of y'all.
Of course not. It's not statistics in a news article.
It's not.
It's human beings and emotions and day-to-day true fear and life experiences that we need to be discussing. Because it's why is it happening at all in the first place?
It's like, I like to think about it like this. I call them like it's the daily little razors, right? It's not the gunshot that kills you, it's the constant little cuts. I kind of liken it to being a woman. The ever-present fear of sexual assault or rape is a big thing to think about and deal with every day. But the daily razors of catcalling or microaggressions towards you as a woman, those are the things that drive someone crazy. Also, there's a lot of talk about racism going on and perspectives and viewpoints and experiences of people of color, but there's not a lot of talk about whiteness amongst white people.
And this is what I want to wrap up with. I want to know exactly what, this time around with Black Lives Matter, what is your hope? What is your dream? What is your hope that people will wake up to?
My hope and my dream is that the world, but specifically white folks, are able to come to a greater understanding of whiteness and what that means to be white, going all the way back. We cannot just focus on just the now. We have to focus on what you all were set up to deal with or to not deal with. How you all were set up for fragility. So my hope is that we, but particularly white people, can get a greater understanding of whiteness from the inside out. And when that happens, when white people understand whiteness and how that affects everything, when that happens, I think the release and disconnect will be so much easier to move forward. Because right now, white people are having a hard time just releasing the fact that there was no escaping it. There was no such thing as anyone not have been being indoctrinated by white supremacy. There are varying degrees of that. Everyone has something that needs to be exfoliated from their spirit.
But when we say Black Lives Matter, I feel like a lot of people also don't understand that that's a call for equality. It's not saying Black lives only matter. Black lives matter way more than yours.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's a call for let's all be okay with sharing.
And here's the thing, one of my phrases that I love is that when you are of the majority, equality will always feel like oppression.
What do you feel like white people are afraid of right now? Where do you feel like the fear is coming from right now?
I feel like there are white folks who are afraid because they're afraid of not being in power and being on top and being comfortable and having the system set up for them. The reality is that white folks know that the system is set up. No, people are not in the dark about that. And then you have human beings that happen to be white who are scared of being wrong or corrected or being lumped in with white folks, or they're scared of recognizing or acknowledging that they have been in some way or have been indoctrinated by white supremacy. I don't think there's any such thing as a white person on this planet who isn't scared of something. There are white people who are not scared of doing the work and are wanting to do the work, but they are scared of not succeeding. You might not nail it the first time around.
Right. I will say, as a white person, I am so excited about having these discussions, but also deep fear of saying the wrong thing and just offending someone that I love.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
And the thing is, it's going to happen. I try to tell the white folks that I say yes to having conversations with, it's gonna happen. And like anything in life, it might result in you offending someone to the point where they don't know how to deal with you moving forward. Or you offend them and like an adult and human being, you apologize and then that person can move forward. There is no guarantee in that world. There is no expectation on validation from the work that you're doing. There should be no expectation that if you're doing the work that someone of color has to give you a gold star.
For white people, just because we're all ready to talk about race right now, it doesn't mean, or racial injustice, it doesn't mean that we deserve a round of applause.
Right. And I think part of that too is one of the suggestions that I've been giving to people, aside from books, like White Fragility, all the reading materials, I am challenging all my white friends to ingest a different kind of pop culture or Black culture. Black culture is pop culture. The influences are everywhere. I challenge people and I'm just like, hey, so did you grow up watching The Cosby Show? Usually white people say yes. Did you grow up watching A Different World? No, either they don't know what that is or they never watched it, even though they came on right after each other. Watch Different World. Go watch something Black as hell. Start ingesting things that literally don't look like you. I made a point, I have a lot of, I'm at the phase now where I have a lot of friends who have young kids, toddlers, kindergarten, they're all starting at the reading age. I'm only giving books now to kids, I'm not giving them toys. And it can be a book that they can grow into, but I also made the pact I'm only giving these children, whether they're male identified or female identified, I'm only giving them books that feature girls of color. If you're a little boy, you're going to have to start reading these books about these girls. And they're going to be girls that don't look like you.
I love that. Okay, I love these suggestions of starting to educate children from a very young age and watching something that was not in your household growing up. What else would you say to white people who want to be a good ally in general with their activism, but also maybe want to support their friends of color during this time?
First off, just like there's no one way to protest, there is no one way to be an ally. There's multiple ways. There's a ton of ways to be an ally. Sit down with yourself, literally like anything else, like what are your strengths? What are you good at? What are the best ways you communicate? And start from there. And in that, you'll find your allyship style. On top of that, you should be sitting, looking at something and being like, well, how does this Black thing make me feel? Does it make me feel joyous? Does it make me feel excluded? Does it make me feel intrigued? Does it make me feel scared? Start dissecting, honestly, all of your perspectives about anything Black or anything brown to really figure out where your blind spots are or where the indoctrination is resting in your body. And then in terms of supporting, it could be anything from, if you're on Instagram or Twitter, just reposting something that you think is important, or if it's something that just makes you smile or laugh, making sure people's handles are known. How about just randomly picking a Black person to follow? You never know what you could get. Start paying attention to what all of your Black friends are posting in terms of like pop culture, music, books. What are we watching? What are we talking about amongst ourselves? Those are avenues there that could give you more information about what it's like to just be us, how we find joy, how we commune together, our senses of humor. All those small things are also just as important. Or send an organization money. Those are my initial suggestions. But my main suggestion is just keep checking in with yourself about how you feel about everything. There's always something else to be uncovered. And that also includes checking in with your circle of friends. Are you around people that are doing the same kind of work that you are? And if they're not, then that needs to be addressed.
Jason, thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
You're so thoughtful. You're so eloquent. You're
Thank
so
you.
brave with everything you talked about. I really appreciate it. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
And I was so happy to see you.
Me too.